Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. A quote of the day is sometimes it takes a natural disaster to reveal a social disaster. Today, the topic of my presentation is natural disasters and their management under the supervision of my professor, Dr. Saira Afzal. Learning outlines are introduction of disaster, natural disasters, general management of disasters, specific management of flood, earthquakes, and specific management of storms, and recent updates. Learning outcomes are at the end of this presentation, participants will be able to describe about the natural disasters and their management along with the specific measures for earthquake, flood, thunderstorm, and clouds of toxic fumes. Now, what is a disaster? A disaster can be defined as any occurrence that causes damage, ecological disruption, loss of human life, or deterioration of health and health services on a scale sufficient to warrant an extraordinary response from outside the affected community or area. A natural disaster is a major adverse event resulting from natural processes of the earth. Examples include firestorms, dust storms, floods, and hurricanes. This slide shows the types of natural disaster. There are geophysical, biological, meteorological, hydrological, and climatological. Earthquake, volcano, landslides, and rockfalls comes under the category of geophysical. Epidemic, infectious diseases, and insect bites are under the biological disasters. Local storms, tropical and extratropical cyclones, tornadoes are under the meteorological umbrella. A tsunami, flood, hailstorm, landslide, wet if it is, and rockfall if it is wet, then these are the causes of hydrological disasters. Heat waves, cold waves, drought, and forest fire are under the climatological natural disasters. Now, disaster management. There are three fundamental aspects of disaster management. First is disaster response, second is disaster preparedness, and third is disaster mitigation. These three aspects of disaster management corresponds to different phases in the so-called disaster cycle. Medical treatments that are given during the disaster. Medical treatment for large number of casualties is likely to be needed only after certain types of disasters. The management of mass casualties can be further divided into search and rescue, first aid, triage and stabilization of victims, hospital treatment, and redistribution of patients to other hospitals if necessary. Now, what is search, rescue, and first aid? After a major disaster, the need for search, rescue, and first aid is likely to be so great that organized relief services will be able to meet only a small fraction of the demand. Most immediate help comes from the uninjured survivors. Field care. Most injured persons convert spontaneously to the health facilities using whatever transport is available, regardless of the facility's operating status, etc. Providing proper care to casualties requires that the health services resources be redirected to this new priority. Bed availability and surgical services should be maximized. Provisions should be made for food and shelter. Triage. When the quantity and severity of injuries overwhelm the operative capacity of health facilities, a different approach to medical treatment must be adopted. The principle of first come, first treated is not followed in mass emergencies. Triage consists of rapidly classifying the injured on the basis of the severity of their injuries and the likelihood of their survival with prompt medical intervention. These are the triage codes, can be green, yellow, red, and blue. Green shows that the patients are a bit stable and can be discharged, while yellow shows that there is a single organ failure going. Red shows that if resources are available, these patients should be intubated. And blue shows that these patients will only be needing palliative care. Uh, Care of the dead is also included in the management of disaster. This includes First is the removal of dead from the disaster scene. Second is the shifting to mortuary. Third is the identification. Fourth is reception of bereaved relatives. And proper respect for the dead is of great importance. This phase begins with when assistance from outside starts to reach the disaster area. The type and quantity of humanitarian relief supplies are usually determined by two main factors. First is the type of disaster, since distinct events have different effects on the population, and the type and the quantity of supplies available locally. Disaster managers must be prepared to receive large quantities of donations, and are four principal components in managing humanitarian supplies. First is the acquisition of supplies, second is transportation, third storage, and fourth is distribution. Another important step in the management of disaster is epidemiological surveillance and disease control. Disaster can increase the transmission of communicable diseases through following mechanism. First is the overcrowding and the poor sanitation in temporary resettlements. This accounts in part for the reported increase in acute respiratory infections, etc., that are following the disaster. Second is the population displacement may lead to introduction of communicable diseases to which either the migrant or indigenous populations are susceptible. Disruption and the contamination of water supplies, damage to the sewage system and power systems are common in natural disasters. Disruption of routine control programs as funds and personnel are usually diverted to relief work. Ecological changes may favor breeding of vectors and increase in the vector population density. Displacement of domestic and wild animals who carry with them zoonosis that can be transmitted to humans as well as to other animals. Leptospirosis cases has been reportedly following large floods. Anthrax has been reported occasionally. Provision of emergency foods, water, and shelter in disaster situations from different or new sources may itself be a source of infectious diseases. Care of nutrition. A natural disaster may affect the nutritional status of the population by affecting one or more component of the food chain, depending on the type, duration, and extent of the disaster, as well as the food and nutritional conditions that are existing in the area before the catastrophe. The immediate steps for ensuring that the food relief program will be effective includes: first is assessing the food supplies after the disaster, and second is gauging the nutritional needs of the affected population. Third is calculating daily food rations and need for large population groups, and monitoring the nutritional status of the affected population. Now, rehabilitation. The final phase in a disaster should lead to the restoration of pre-disaster condition. Rehabilitation starts from the very first moment of the disaster. Too often, measures decided in a hurry tends to obstruct re-establishment of normal conditions of life. Services should be reorganized and reconstructed. Priorities in the case of rehabilitation are also shift from healthcare towards environmental health measures, and some of these are water supplies, food supply, basic sanitation, and vector control programs. Water supply. A survey of all public water supplies should be made. This includes distribution systems and water sources. The main public safety aspect of the water quality is microbial contamination. The first priority of ensuring water quality in emergency situations is chlorination. Chemical contamination and toxicity are concerned in water quality, and potential contaminants have to be identified and analyzed. The existing and new water sources require the following protection measures. One is restrict access to people and animals. If possible, erect a fence and appoint a guard. Second, to ensure adequate excreta disposal at a safe distance from water source. Third is prohibit bathing, washing, and animal husbandry upstream of intake points in river and streams. Fourth point is upgrade wells to ensure that they are protected to and from contamination. Food safety. Poor hygiene is the major cause of foodborne diseases in the disaster situation, where feeding programs are used, shelters or camps. Kitchen sanitation is of utmost importance. Basic sanitation and personal hygiene. Many communicable diseases are spread through fecal contamination of drinking water and food. Hence, every effort should be made to ensure that the sanitary disposal of the excreta is done. Washing, cleaning, and bathing facilities should be provided to the displaced persons. Vector control program. Vector control program for vector-borne diseases should be intensified in emergency and rehabilitation period, especially in the areas where such diseases are known to be endemic. Of special concern are dengue fever, malaria, leptospirosis, red white fever, typhus, and plague. Floodwater provides ample breeding opportunities for mosquitoes. Disaster preparedness. Emergency preparedness is a program of long term development activities whose goals are to strengthen the overall capacity and capability of a country to manage efficiently all types of emergencies. It should bring about an orderly transition from relief to recovery and back to sustained development. The objective of the disaster preparedness is to ensure that the appropriate systems, procedures, and resources are in place to provide prompt, effective assistance to disaster victims, thus facilitating relief measures and rehabilitation of services. Authorities are often under considerable public and political measure to begin mass vaccination programs, usually against typhoid, cholera, and tetanus. The pressure may be increased by the press media and offer of vaccination from abroad. The WHO does not recommend typhoid and cholera vaccine in routine use in endemic areas. Now, world's most common natural disasters are floods are the most common, about 42%, then storms. After that, earthquakes, extreme temperatures, landslides, droughts, wildfires, and volcanic activities are shown. Floods. A flood is an overflow of water that submerges land. The floods directive defines a flood as a temporary covering of the land that is usually dry with water. In the sense of flowing water, the word may also be applied to the inflow of tides. Flooding may result from the volumes of the body of water, such as a river, lake, becoming higher than usual, causing some of the water to escape its usual boundaries. What to do beforehand a flood? While town planning is a government responsibility, individuals should find out about the risk in the areas where they live. For example, people who live in areas downstream from a dam should at least know the special signals such as fog horns that are used when a dam threatens to break. Small floods can be foreseen by watching the water level after heavy rains and regularly listening to the weather forecast. During a flood, turn off the electricity to reduce the risk of electrocution. Protect people and property as soon as the flood begins. Take any vulnerable people, children, old, sick, and disabled to an upper floor. Beware of the water contamination. If the taste, color, or smell of the water is suspicious, it is vital to use some means of purification. Evacuate danger zones as ordered by the local authorities. It is essential to comply strictly with the evacuation advice given. Authorities will recommend that families take with them the emergency supplies that they have prepared. After a flood, when the flood is over, it is important that people do not return home until told to do so by local authorities, who will have ensured that the buildings have not been undermined by water. From then on, it is essential to wait until the water is declared safe before drinking any that is untreated. Clean and disinfect any room that has been flooded. Sterilize or wash with boiling water all dishes and kitchen utensils. Get rid of any food that has been in or near the water, including canned foods and any food that is kept in the refrigerator and freezer. Get rid of all consumables like drinks, medicines, cosmetics, etc. Storm. A violent disturbance of the atmosphere with strong winds and usually rain, thunder, lightning, or snow. A storm is any disturbed state of an environment or an astronomical body's atmosphere, especially affecting its surface or strongly implying severe weather. The wind which affects the movement of storms and should be known to both meteorologists as well as the pilots are the jet streams. Tropical cyclone or hurricane is a rapidly rotating storm system that is characterized by low pressure center and a closed low level atmospheric circulation, strong winds, and a spiral arrangement of the thunderstorm that produces heavy rainfall or squalls. A tornado is a violently rotating column of the air that is in contact with both the surface of the earth and a cumulonimbus cloud, or in rare cases, the base of the cumulus cloud. A tornado warning means that tornado is happening in your country. Storms, hurricanes, and tornadoes. What to do beforehand in them? Above all, it is vital that the people find out about what kind of storm is liable to strike their region so that they can take optimum preventive measures and choose a shelter in advance before the emergency occurs. A cellar, a basement, or an alcove may be a perfectly suitable place. Minimize the effect of the storm. Fell dead trees, prune tree branches, regularly check the status of roofs, the state of the ground, and the drainage around houses, and take measures against flooding. Prepare a family emergency kit. During an emergency, listen to the information and advice provided by the authorities. Do not go out in the car or boat once the storm has been announced. Evacuate houses if the authorities request is taking the family emergency package. If possible, tie down any object liable to be blown away by the wind. If caught outside in a storm, take refuge as quickly as possible in a shelter. If there is no shelter, lie down flat in a ditch. Do not use any electrical appliances or the telephone. After an emergency, after the storm has subsided, follow the instructions given by the authorities. Stay indoors and do not go to the stricken areas. Give the alert as quickly as possible and give the first aid to the injured. Earthquake. A sudden violent shaking of the ground, typically causing great destruction as a result of the movements within the earth crust or volcanic action. An earthquake is caused by a sudden flip or a fault. When the stress on the edge overcomes the friction, there is an earthquake that releases energy in waves that travels through the earth crust and causes the shaking that we feel. Now, management of earthquake is what to do beforehand. Build in accordance with the urban planning regulations for risk areas. Ensure that all electrical and gas appliances in houses, together with all pipes connected to them, are firmly fixed. Avoid storing heavy objects and materials in high positions. Hold family evacuation drills, and ensure that the whole family knows what to do in the case of earthquake. During an earthquake, keep calm, do not panic. People who are indoors should stay there, but move to the central part of the building. Keep away from the stairs which might collapse suddenly. People who are outside should stay there, keeping away from the building to avoid collapsing walls, and away from electrical cables. Anyone in the vehicle should park it, keeping away from the bridge and buildings. After an earthquake, obey the authorities' instructions. Do not go back into the damaged building since tremors may start again at any moment. Give first aid to the injured and alert the emergency services in case of fire or burst pipes, etc. Do not go simply to look at the stricken areas. This will hamper rescue work. Keep emergency package and a radio near at hand. Clouds of toxic fumes. A mass of airborne toxins, for example, as aerosolized bacterial pathogens, chemicals, or fumes that are released by the burning of a hazardous substance. What is the management? What should be done beforehand? People in the risk areas should find out about the evacuation plans and facilities. Familiarize themselves with the alarm signals used in case of emergency. Equip doors and windows with the tightest possible fastenings. Prepare family emergency kits. During an emergency, do not use the telephone, leave lines free for rescue services. Listen to the messages that are given by radio and other media. Carry out the instructions transmitted by the radio or loudspeaker. close doors and windows, stop up air intake, seals any crack or gaps around the windows and door with adhesive tape, organize a reserve of water, a ton of ventilators and air conditioners. After an emergency, comply with the authorities' instructions and do not go out until there is no longer any risk. Carry out necessary decontamination measures. Now, coming towards the recent advances, there's an article that is disaster management and community planning and public participation, how to achieve sustainable hazard mitigation. Important points in the article, they are: the paper offers first a brief historical overview of the disaster management planning. Second, it reviews Australian and American research findings and showed that they urge the field of disaster management to shift its focus from response and recovery to sustainable hazard mitigation. Third, it is asserted that if mitigative strategies are to be successfully implemented, then the disaster management process must incorporate public participation at the local decision making level. Another article is that the disaster risk and disaster management policies and practices in Pakistan, a critical analysis of the Disaster Management Act 2010 of Pakistan. The objective is to evaluate the Disaster Management Act 2010 in Pakistan through critical reviews of the Act. This study has found out that the Act emphasizes mainly on the institution building and action plan development for mitigation disasters in the country. The Act does not directly mention disaster risk reduction, and there are no directions with regard to the budgetary mechanisms and the extent of the funds from disaster risk management in the country. The disaster risk management in Pakistan is reactive, and there is a need for revision of the Act to make it proactive. Another article is the current capacities, preparedness, and needs of the local institutions in dealing with disaster risk reduction in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Pakistan. This study conducted 40 key informations from 19 institutions working at the local level to identify the current capacities, preparedness, and gaps in disaster management cycle of local institutions in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, Pakistan, using 5 indicators of disaster preparedness failure. This descriptive study statistics are used to explore the study objectives. The study findings revealed that the majority of the local institutions were underprepared in terms of awareness and training, human resources, financial resources, infrastructure, and equipments and coordination. The results further indicated that the existing preparedness capacity gaps should be bridged through capacity building training, technical support, and financial capacity and infrastructure buildings. Now coming towards the MCQs. First is earthquake, volcanic eruptions, and other underwater explosions above or below both have the potential to generate a tsunami. It is one of the major types of natural disasters, among which of the following is the type of this tsunami natural disaster. Option A is meteorological, option B is hydrological, option C biological, and option D is geophysical. Option B is the right one, a hydrological disaster. Second is Mr. Ali was taken to the emergency department of Mayo Hospital with a history of head trauma because of car accident, mainly because of landsliding. Dry landslidings are a major trouble for traveling towards the hilly areas. It falls under which category of natural disaster? Option A is hydrological, B meteorological, C geophysical, and option D biological. Dry landslidings are of geophysical type. Option C is the right one. In October 2008, there was a severe earthquake in Pakistan that caused about thousands of deaths and many were buried in the buildings. To help the survivors of the disaster, it is seen that most immediate help comes from which of the following? Option A is army of the country, option B administration of the area, option C uninjured survivors of the area, and option D school going adults. Option C is the right one, uninjured survivors. Fourth MCQ is Mr. Shahid is a teacher by profession. During his class, some of the people noticed the start of earthquake. To prevent mass damage during this natural disaster, the students of the school should do which of the following measures? Option A, move under the stairs. Option B, move to the center of the room. Option D, should relax and study. And option D, move to the center of the building. Option D is the right one. Uh, Option MCQ fifth is a natural disaster is a major adverse event resulting from natural processes of the earth. The final phase in the disaster should lead to the restoration of the pre-disaster conditions. This phase begins at option A, 1 week after the disaster. Option B is 1 day after the disaster. Option C at the very first moment of disaster. And option D is when administration is willing. Option C is the right one. At the very first moment of the disaster, it should begin. Vector control program for vector-borne diseases should be intensified in the emergency and rehabilitation period, especially in areas where such diseases are known to be endemic. The WHO does not recommend which of the following vaccine in routine use in endemic areas. Option A is typhoid and cholera. Option B is cholera and typhus. Option C, tuberculosis and cholera. Option D, malaria and typhoid. Uh, option
C.
A, option A is the right one, typhoid and cholera. In Hafiz Center, Lahore, some jerky movements were felt. People ran out of the building to save their lives. The magnitude of the earthquake measured was 7.2 at that time. People has many belongings in the building. At what time should they go back to their places? Option A, they should go back immediately after the jerks. Option B, they should wait for the authorities to come and visit that place. Option C, should not go in the damaged buildings. And option D is should get only electric appliances from inside. Option B is the right one. They should wait for the authorities to order them to move. Option MCQ 8 is while town planning is a government responsibility, individuals should find out about risk in the area where they live. For example, people who live in the area downstream from a dam should know at least about. Option A is foghorn, option B tidal waves, option C special flood signals, and option D how to make new homes. Option C is the right one. They should know about special flood signals. Mr. Usman is a pilot by profession. However, many a times the flight gets cancelled by the reports saying that a storm is expected. The winds which affect the movement of the storms and should be known to both meteorologists as well as pilots are option A jet streams, option B westerlies, option C trade winds, or option D polar easterlies. Option A is the right one, jet streams. 10th MCQ is Mr. Jones is a resident of United States. The United States has the most tornadoes of any country. To protect the lives of people and belonging, signs are given for it by experts. A tornado warning sign means option A is tornado is likely to happen, but it is not certain. Option B is tornado is happening in your country. Option C, tornado is in next few weeks is expected. Option D, tornado can happen in seaside. Option B is the right one. Tornado is happening in your country. This is the key. These are my references and thank you.